Okay, firstly, hi. This is my first ever video podcast episode ever, and it's kind of scary. I've been thinking for a while that I want to be in front of the camera so that people can actually listen to the episodes, but also watch it on YouTube if they want to. And this past week, I actually finally decided that I'm going to do it. So here I am. If you're listening to this episode on a podcast platform, welcome, but also a big welcome to everyone watching on YouTube. I'm feeling very witchy today. I have my dark feminine outfit on, and I am ready for today's episode. I'm so passionate about this topic because I think it's something that we don't get taught in school, emotional maturity, how to deal with relationships and with each other's emotions. We don't get taught that in school. So I'm excited to get into it. But firstly, about the video episodes. So if you've been listening for a while, you know that I'm a digital nomad, so I travel full time, which means that I'm not sure how these podcast episodes will work, the video ones. I'm not going to have a set studio. Obviously, I'll be traveling around. So it's going to be a little bit from everywhere, and we'll figure it out as we go along. And I mean, not so coincidentally, that is the slogan of this podcast. This is Lost and Found. This is the space where we figure things out in real time together. And I'm your host, Carmen Vit, and welcome to the first ever video podcast episode. So last week, I did an episode about what we need to look back on in 2025 to have a better 2026. And one of the reflection prompts was, when did you feel most insecure and triggered? And what did that reveal about your inner world and about the people you surround yourself with, etc., etc.? And while I was talking about that point, I shared a rather vulnerable story about trust and jealousy and something that happened in my 2025 that made me feel triggered and kind of how I dealt with that and how I thought about it. And I was honestly hesitant to share that story, but surprisingly, I got a bunch of DMs from listeners saying that they really resonated with it and that what I had to say about controlling behavior really sat well with them, and they wanted to hear more about it. So in this week's episode, I want to dive a little deeper into toxic habits and how they shape our relationships. And when I say relationships, I mean all relationships. So that could be romantic, relationships with our family, with your parents, but also importantly, relationships with ourselves. Because relationships are the most foundational aspect of our human experience. The quality of our relationships affect everything. It affects our happiness, our mental health, our life satisfaction, our success, even our physical health. Now, this won't just be a list of do's and don'ts. So with every toxic behavior that I'll name, I'll also tell you what you can do instead and how to handle situations in a more emotionally mature and healthier way. Now, obviously, quick disclaimer, I am not a therapist and I am not qualified on paper to give you advice. But I do have a degree in philosophy and literature and over 2.5 years of full-time travel behind me, which means that I've spent most of my adult life observing human nature and collecting stories and meeting new people and starting over and making friends and having relationships and breakups and misunderstandings and reconciliations. And I can tell you without a doubt that I've learned things about emotional maturity through trial and error, but also, of course, through my own curiosity and research. I'm really interested in how we relate to one another and how we love, how we attach. So a lot of this has been, of course, inspired by writers and thinkers and relationship experts and podcasters that I really admire. People like Margarita Nazarenko, she's such an idol to me. Her podcast, Being Her, I listen to that a lot. Jay Shetty, Florence Given, Bell Hooks, many others. So that's kind of the backbone of where all of this is coming from, along with my own experience, of course. Okay, so without further ado, the number one biggest toxic behavior that ruins relationships. And this is the biggest number one in the history of number ones because it's going to include a lot of different things that are actually just the same thing in different forms. And that is guilt tripping. And guilt tripping includes self-sacrificing behavior, martyrdom, keeping the score, overgiving, keeping yourself small in order to be loved. These are all the same disease, but in different outfits. So Margarita Nazarenko talks a lot about mother, martyr, manager, and muse energy. And the one that matters here is the martyr. Oh, people love to be martyrs, especially women in relationships, You do everything. You give so much. You bend over backwards for your partner, for your friends, your parents. You exhaust yourself for other people because in a sick, twisted way, it makes you feel superior. Look how selfless I am. Look how much I give. And it creates this false sense of security in relationships because you think, if I do all of this, they will love me. They have to be grateful. Eventually, they might even become dependent on me, and then they won't be able to leave. So I'm safe, right? And they owe me. And then, when they don't react with enough gratitude, or they don't give you the emotional security you feel entitled to in exchange for all of these things that you're doing, that they never asked you to do, that's when the guilt tripping comes out. You bring up everything at once. You throw it in their face. You say, look what I've done for you. Look, how dare you make a decision that I don't like? How dare you enjoy something that doesn't involve me? That is guilt tripping. And that's also keeping the score. Keeping score is guilt tripping in slow motion, because you're not giving freely. You're keeping emotional receipts. And when something doesn't go your way, that's when you cash those emotional receipts in. And that's not generosity. You may be telling yourself it's generosity, but it's not. It's emotional debt collection. It shows up with parents who say, I gave up my life for you. I've done so much for you, and now you want to leave me? You want to go study something that I don't want you to study? You want to date somebody that I don't approve of? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, kill me. Like, that's so annoying. Personally, I no longer engage with that kind of bullshit. Because at the core of it all, we need to realize that humans, all humans, are deeply, deeply free. Your decisions are yours, and other people's reactions are their own. You don't owe anybody anything. But the catch then is, nobody owes you anything either. Except kindness, of course. And this is an important distinction that I want to make. Kindness is how we treat each other. So kindness is in how you say no. It is not saying no, Kindness is in how you disagree, how you leave. Kindness does not mean self-sacrifice, and it does not mean overextending yourself. Kindness is not keeping the peace and betraying your own desires. You can say, I love you, but I'm not going to do that. Or, I understand this hurts you, but I'm still choosing to do it. That is not cruelty. That's just being an adult and taking responsibility for your own life. The moment you start believing people owe you something, that's when it becomes dangerous, because that's when you believe that the world owes me something and you become bitter. And bitterness only poisons the person carrying it. You're the one becoming resentful and heavy, and you're becoming insufferable to be around, always acting like the world owes you something or that the world has wronged you in some way. But when you realize you are responsible for your own happiness, something shifts, you become lighter and you stop trying to control other people. And paradoxically, that's when you become a source of warmth. Not because you're pouring yourself out, but because you are already full, and what you are giving yourself, that warmth and that kindness, it's spilling over onto other people. Wait, let me take a sip of my tea. So people often ask me, how are you so happy? And I think that is one of the most beautiful compliments that I can get. Or, when people say, oh, you're glowing, what are you doing? You have so much zest. I love those kind of compliments. And the answer is that I'm just really good at doing whatever the fuck I want. And if that triggered you, if that sentence made you be like, oh, who does she think she is? I want you to pause for a second and look inward. Because when you have a reaction like that, it's rarely about the other person. And it's almost always about a desire that's been suppressed within you. When we feel irritated or we get defensive or we become judgmental towards someone who's just unapologetically living the kind of life that they want, it often points to something that we want, or maybe that we've wanted in the past, but decided that, oh, we're not allowed to have that for some reason. It may be something we talked ourselves out of wanting, something you buried under layers of responsibility and politeness and fear or other people's expectations. And I know it's much easier to call somebody else selfish or reckless or arrogant than to ask yourself the harder question of, where have I actually been abandoning myself? Because watching someone else exercise their freedom can feel really uncomfortable when you are denying yourself your own freedom. So if that sentence rubbed you the wrong way, maybe don't judge the sentence. Try and follow the feeling. It might be pointing back to a part of yourself that's been waiting for permission to come out, to follow the feeling. Okay, back to doing whatever the hell you want. When I say do whatever you want, I don't mean that in a way that harms others, but in a way that honors your freedom. So when I started traveling, my family told me that it was unsafe, it was unrealistic, irresponsible. They even told me that it would be so unfair towards them because they're gonna miss me so much. And I told them, lovingly and respectfully, that this is what I'm gonna do, and you're not gonna stop me. Because if I had stayed to keep them comfortable, I would have ended up resenting them and resenting myself. And years later, I would have said stuff like, I stayed for you, so now you owe me. That's how resentment is born. That's how you start guilt-tripping people and keeping a score and seeing yourself as a martyr. And that's when you start poisoning your relationships. Exercising your free will is not selfish. It is stewardship. It is showing reverence for your own life. I want you to imagine something. Imagine you buy someone a gift, someone you really love, and you're so excited for them to open it. You've thought about it really carefully. You've chosen it carefully. Let's say it's a sweater, right? And you're not just excited for them to open it and own it, but you're excited for them to wear it. To see that sweater becoming lived in, to see the seams loosen a little bit and the fabric soften and the sleeves stretch out over time because it's been worn and loved and used so much, right? You want that. You're excited for it because that's the gift you're giving the person. But now imagine that person opens the gift and says, oh, no. This is way too nice for me. I don't want to ruin it. So they take the sweater and they hang it up in the cupboard. Or they say, actually, take it back. Or worse, they say, I'll give it to someone else who's more deserving. What? You're going to be disappointed, wouldn't you? It would feel like a rejection or like a slap in the face. Because the point of the gift was never preservation, it was use. Well, that's exactly how it is with your life. That's exactly how divine energy or the creator or God or your higher self, whatever language you want to use, that's exactly how it feels when you say, actually, this gift of freedom and these talents that I have and these dreams that I've been born with, they're far too precious for me to use. I'm scared I'm going to break them, so I'm going to hang them in the cupboard to keep them safe. Or actually, I'm just going to give it over to someone else who's more deserving, someone who's braver or more audacious. I could never use them. Oh, no. Because what will my parents say if I do this? What would people in my hometown say if I do this? Oh, come on. So instead of using your freedom and using those gifts, you sit there eating your humble crumble, like Florence Given says, and you give your juicy, fat, delicious life and your highest potential over to someone else. And what's worse is, you make yourself feel better about it by dressing it up as humility or self-sacrifice. No, it's fear, and it's fucking boring. It's you hanging the gift of life and freedom in the cupboard and telling yourself you're noble for not touching it. Living according to other people's expectations, shrinking yourself so you don't make anyone else feel uncomfortable, staying small so you don't risk judgment, that's not selflessness. That is self-betrayal. And dressing it up as martyrdom or self-sacrifice or humility doesn't make it prettier. It just makes it socially acceptable in some way, or acceptable for you. It's your way of trying to soothe yourself because you're not doing what you know you're meant to be doing. Your life was not meant to be kept pristine. It was meant to be worn and stretched and used and possibly even a little torn at the seams. Your life is supposed to be lived in, not kept safe in a cupboard where you think it's going to be protected. No. Live in your life. It's yours. Make decisions for you. Okay, so I said before, I'm not just going to name these toxic behaviors, right? I'm going to tell you what to do instead. So this is what you do instead. Instead of guilt tripping and playing the martyr, stop doing things you'll resent later. You are going to say no with love and kindness and without excuses if you do not have the capacity to do that thing without expecting anything in return. If you cannot do that, then you say no. So, I want you to make the decision that from now on, you are going to give freely or not at all. Choose kindness, not obligation. No more emotional loans, no more resentment, no more keeping score. Choose kindness, not obligation. And yes, this will feel really uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been socialized into being the good girl, the peacemaker, the one who doesn't complain, the one who says yes even though she doesn't have time to do the thing, the eldest daughter. It's gonna feel uncomfortable for you. You were taught don't make things awkward. You were taught to say yes even when you're exhausted. So yeah, you will feel selfish when you do it for the first time. And maybe you'll feel like you're letting people down. But that discomfort, it's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're unlearning a lifetime of conditioning. And the more you practice this, the more you will notice something that's really surprising. And that is that the people who love you will adjust. And the people who benefited from your self-abandonment, they're the ones who won't adjust. And yeah, maybe they'll leave. But guess what? You will be better off. And that information, who stays and who leaves, that's invaluable. Because healthy relationships don't require martyrdom or for you to earn your place. They just require honesty and presence in the moments that you actually spend together and a kind regard for one another. That's what healthy relationships are made of. Okay, number 2, not being able to say you're sorry. Blame shifting or playing the victim. You must remember that yes, you mess up. You're human. But instead of owning it, do you explain it away? Do you justify? Do you deflect? You immediately start to bring in context and you say things like, oh, that's not what I meant, or you're misunderstanding me, or I only did that because of you. And then very quickly, the conversation stops being about the thing you did and it becomes about how attacked you feel. So now the person who was hurt is the one comforting you. And somehow, now you've become the victim in all of this. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe you are that person, or you've done something like that, or you know a person like that. And it's awful. This is one of the fastest ways to destroy a relationship. Because when someone brings you something vulnerable, when they say, this hurt me, they are not asking for a courtroom defense. They are not asking for your intentions. They're not asking for a philosophical discussion about logic. They are just asking for you to meet them and witness their emotions. And every time you shift the focus away from your impact onto your self-image, what you really are saying is, my need to be seen as a good person matters more than your experience. And honestly, I didn't understand this properly until I actually lived it. So I have an ex who every time I tried to express hurt, he would say things like, oh, you feel that way, Carmen? Oh my, I still hear his voice in my head. It rattles me. He would say, you're so entitled to your feelings, aren't you? But feelings aren't objective truths. Just because you feel something doesn't mean that I actually did something wrong. Can you believe that? And then he would say things like, feelings aren't logical. And I remember how that would catch me off guard every single time. Because on the one hand, my heart would break even more because the person who now is supposed to love me is at this point now standing against my inner reality instead of meeting that reality and those emotions with care. So that was the one part. But then on the other hand, he would say it in this calm, almost intellectual, reasonable way that I actually did start to doubt myself. And I began to think that I was crazy. And that's the danger in this kind of behavior. It doesn't sound cruel at first. They make it seem really smart. Because instead of talking about what he did, what hurt me and how it landed for me, the conversation was then quickly rerouted into a debate about whether feelings are logical or valid or objective, this like meta debate, which is very convenient. Because the moment you start debating whether feelings are rational, you no longer actually have to talk about accountability or what actually happened, right? It rattles me even just now talking about it. I mean, yeah, so feelings are not objective facts, but they are subjective truths. And in relationships, subjective truths matter. If someone tells you, that hurt me, and your first instinct is to invalidate the feeling instead of being curious about the impact, that is not emotional maturity. That is gaslighting. And it works so well because it makes you question yourself, right? You're questioning yourself instead of questioning their behavior. So I want to tell you, refusing to take responsibility does not make you rationally evolved or emotionally intelligent. It just makes you unsafe to be honest with. Because why would anyone bring you something tender if it's just going to be turned back on them? So what do you do instead? You say the simplest, hardest sentence in the world. And you say, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I understand how that hurt you. And then you stop talking. No explanation. No buts. No defense. You can talk about context later if that's important to you, once once trust has been restored. But repair firstly starts with ownership. Because taking responsibility doesn't shrink you. It expands you. And it tells the other person, you matter more to me than my ego. And that is the foundation of emotional safety. So number 3 is controlling people. So you play the mother, the manager, and this one often masquerades as love, right? Because you disguise your control as concern, as protection. And you think that, oh, I'm just doing what's best for them. And so you monitor them and you give them advice constantly. And you question their choices and their timing and their friends and their decisions. And you might think that you're being really helpful and you think you're being mature and loving. But what you're actually doing is trying to manage someone else's life so that you can feel safe in your own nervous system. And that never works. I mean, let's be honest here. Control almost never comes from a place of malice. Almost. Mostly, it comes from a place of anxiety. And it comes from not trusting that other people can make their own decisions, or not trusting that you will be okay if they make their own decisions. So you step into that mother energy, and you correct, and you caution, and you warn, or manage your energy. So you make suggestions, and you try and subtly steer them, and you want to optimize their life. And again, it all sounds really reasonable, like you care. But love does not restrict. It allows. Love does not micromanage. It does not need to supervise, especially romantic love. It does not need to preemptively prevent discomfort. Because the moment you start controlling someone, you're no longer relating to them as an equal. Now you're relating to them as a project. And nobody wants to be loved like a project, like a problem to be solved, like a child. Control kills intimacy because it sends one message very clearly, even if you don't mean to send that message. The message you send is, I don't trust you. And if you don't trust someone, you don't actually love them. You love the version of them that behaves in ways that keep you comfortable. I want to say that again. If you don't trust someone, you don't actually love them. You love the version of them that behaves in a way that makes you feel comfortable. And that's not love. That's conditional approval. And it shows up everywhere, in partners who monitor each other's friendships, who check each other's phones and all that crap, and parents who guilt their children into certain life paths, and in friends who get concerned when you start changing or growing or maybe acting differently. And the irony is that the more you try to control people, the more they pull away. You've seen it, right? Because autonomy is not negotiable. It is a biological need for us humans. So what do you need to do instead of controlling? Let people be who they are. Let them disappoint you. Let them choose differently. And if someone else's autonomy feels threatening to you, if their independence makes you jealous or anxious, that feeling just shows that something is inside of you that needs to be looked at. It is information that something unresolved lies within you. So ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I can't control this person? What story am I telling myself about safety and love and abandonment? Because love requires supervision. It's not love. It is just fear. And remember what we believe about fear here at Lost and Found? It's fucking boring. The bravest thing you can do in any relationship, the most emotionally mature adult thing you can do, is trust someone enough to let them be free. Let them be their own person. Let them show you who they really are. If they betray you, if they cheat, then at least you know. You know that they were never meant for you in the first place. And you're free, Foster, to go and find someone who is actually meant for you and who will be good for you. That's the gift you give yourself and to them. Okay, number 4. Another one that is so toxic but shows up everywhere, and you know it, and it's being passive aggressive. Passive aggression is just cowardice that you're pretending is you being polite. It's like sighing instead of saying what you actually mean. It's being sarcastic instead of just being honest. It's when you say, fine, do that, I don't care. When you're obviously not fine, or when you're saying, it's nothing, while you are radiating resentment. So you don't say what you need, but you make damn sure the other person knows that you need something, that you're not really okay. And let's just call it what it is. Passive aggression is punishment without an explanation. You want the other person to notice that you're not okay. You want them to feel uncomfortable and to figure it out on their own, because that's their punishment, right? But also because saying the thing out loud that makes you uncomfortable is risky. So instead of risking vulnerability, you withdraw your warmth and you become sharp, or you go quiet, or you withdraw your intimacy. But really, you want intimacy. You just don't want the exposure of vulnerability. You want closeness without that possibility of rejection. But that doesn't work because relationships cannot survive on just hints and vibes. The sad thing is that passive aggression slowly erodes trust because it teaches people that their honesty will be met with your moodiness instead of communication, instead of your honesty. And so over time, people are going to stop trying. They're going to stop asking you what's wrong and stop leaning in. And honestly, they should, because you're being a baby. And the sad part is, they're going to stop asking you what's wrong, not because they don't care, because it just feels impossible for them to get it right. So what do you do instead? You say the uncomfortable thing clearly and early, not dramatically, not accusingly, not to win an argument or to shame them, but just out of pure honesty. So it sounds like this. When you said that, I felt dismissed. Or, I need reassurance right now. It'd be really nice if you could give me that. Or, you haven't been as communicative these last past days as you usually are. Are you okay? I'm curious what's going on with you, but to be honest, it hasn't made me feel really good. That's how it sounds. I'm not being accusatory. I'm not attacking someone. I'm just sitting in my honesty and giving them that vulnerability and that openness. And when you do that, it brings people closer. But when you're being passive aggressive, it pushes people away. Yeah, directness and honesty can feel scary, but that is what creates real intimacy. And also, how a person responds to that honesty of yours and that vulnerability tells you everything about the relationship. And then you know what you're dealing with, right? Because if they immediately become defensive, if they turn the conversation onto you, they're gaslighting you, then you know what you're dealing with. But you have to say the thing, and you have to say it clearly and honestly. Because if you don't, if you just keep silent and you hold it in, that's what breeds resentment. And finally, the resentment grows and it will explode. And that's the kind of thing that ruins good relationships. Okay, number 5. Mind reading. Mind reading is assuming someone's intentions instead of just asking them questions, asking them what they think, what they meant by that. So do remember that you don't actually know what the other person meant or why they did what they did, but your brain fills in the gaps anyway. And the stories your brain tells you are rarely generous, right? Your brain tells you, oh, they don't care. They're pulling away from you. They did that on purpose. They knew this would hurt you. And then you sulk and you become insufferable to be around. So see how this snowballs? You create an entire narrative in your head, complete with motives and subtext and secret meanings. And then you react to that instead of reality. You're not responding to the person in front of you anymore. You're responding to a story that you wrote about them. And the problem with this mind reading is that you start to feel really intelligent. It feels like you're being intuitive or perceptive, but it's not. Most of the time, it's just your anxiety speaking. It's your anxiety looking for certainty because uncertainty and not having the answers feels unbearable. So you'd rather make up answers than sit in the ambiguity. And the problem is once you've decided what someone's intentions are, everything they do becomes something that confirms that theory. And that's how misunderstandings turn into patterns. And those patterns then turn into resentment. So what do you do instead? You replace your assumptions with curiosity. And you ask the question before you write the story. So you ask them, what did you mean by that? Or, can you help me understand what is going on for you right now? Or, this is the story I'm telling myself. Is it true? Most conflict dissolves the moment that somebody else feels like you're making an effort to understand them and you're not accusing them. And the thing that we all need to remember is that most people are not villains. They're, distracted, or they're busy with their own things, or they're just human. And your curiosity will then keep that relationship human. But assumptions turn relationships into battlegrounds, and it turns things into a situation where people need to defend themselves, and that's not really a positive environment for love and understanding to grow. Okay, number 6. Emotional dumping without consent. Here, I want to tell you something. Take a deep breath. Trauma is not a personality. Trauma is not personality. Margarita Nazarenko always says this. What happened to you is not your fault, but how you deal with it now is your responsibility. But this one's tricky because we want to be vulnerable with our partners, right? Or with our friends. And we have to, because being vulnerable also creates that intimacy that we want. But trauma dumping often disguises itself as vulnerability, as being authentic. But there's a difference between being open and when you're just offloading everything that you're carrying onto another person without checking whether they actually have the capacity to hold it for you. You know, when you're venting endlessly, you're constantly processing out loud. That is trauma dumping. And then suddenly, the relationship that you have with this person becomes very one-directional. That person is no longer relating to you. They are now containing you. They are carrying you. And over time, that becomes exhausting for them. Because intimacy is not built by collapsing into someone else. It's built by meeting each other halfway as equals. You carry me sometimes, I carry you sometimes. The uncomfortable truth is that just because something happened to you doesn't mean that everyone else is responsible for carrying it with you. Yes, your pain deserves compassion, of course, but it also deserves boundaries. Okay, so what do you do instead? Right, that was a lot. What you do is you ask for consent. Before you dive in, you pause and you say, do you have the space for something heavy right now? That's a really nice way to ask someone if they have a emotional capacity for what you're about to say. Do you have space for something heavy right now? Can I vent for a bit? Is that okay? It creates a space of safety instead of this person feeling obligated to just listen to you prattle on. And if their answer is no, that doesn't mean you're too much. It just means that they're dealing with their own stuff, you know? They're not an emotional landfill, they're just a person. So vulnerability must come with boundaries on both sides, because otherwise it's not intimacy, it's just overwhelm. If you want to be really close, it's mutual, you know? And closeness and vulnerability and honesty leaves room for both people. Okay, number 7. Avoiding conflict at all cost. I cannot even begin. And this one also looks like peacekeeping or being low maintenance or easygoing or chill. You know, I don't like conflict. I don't want to rock the boat. So I just let things slide. And I tell myself that I'm being very mature, but what you're actually doing is you're just swallowing your truths. And you're minimizing what is actually happening and you're rationalizing. And you tell yourself over and over again, it's not a big deal. Until, of course, one day it is a big deal. Because avoiding conflict doesn't make the conflict disappear, it just buries it. And what happens to buried things? They rot. There is a massive difference between fighting and guilt tripping and playing the victim and speaking honestly. If you calmly and clearly say how something makes you feel without attacking the person or shaming them or without guilt tripping, without trying to win an argument, if you say something just out of pure honesty, calmly, and the other person reacts badly, that matters. That says something to you. If you say, when that happened, I felt hurt and dismissed, and their response is, you're being too sensitive, or you're overreacting, or why are you trying to start drama, or you're making a problem out of nothing. If they are completely invalidating your experience, please know that that is not conflict, that is gaslighting. A loving response from someone who actually cares about you. Yeah, it's not always going to be perfect. If you come to someone with, you know, when this happened, it hurt me, maybe they will be defensive in the beginning. Maybe they won't immediately say, oh, I was wrong, or yeah, I'm so sorry. Because people are still learning how to be adults. Everyone is. And we're all still unlearning our own patterns, but a loving response will not completely invalidate your inner reality. Someone who loves you will try to understand the impact that their actions made on you. Even if their intention definitely wasn't to hurt you, they'll still try to understand how it became twisted. And someone who's trying to manipulate you will turn your honesty into a flaw of your character. And that's why so many people choose to stay silent, because staying silent feels safer than someone making you feel crazy. I know. I was there. I was made to feel so crazy that I stopped bringing stuff up in the first place. And I just walked around with all these bottled up feelings rotting inside of me and walking around with this feeling of powerlessness. And that's exactly what the emotional manipulator, what the narcissist wants. They want to make you feel crazy so that you don't speak up against them. And so that you start to ignore your own intuition and you don't trust yourself anymore. And then they can completely control you and they can get away with everything. So you need to speak up and also notice how someone reacts to your honesty. Because a relationship that only works when you are quiet is not a healthy relationship. That was really heavy for me. I wish I could hold that past version. The girl that I was in that relationship, I wish I could hold her and tell her all these things. And tell her that I have compassion for you, but you need to hear this truth. I wish she could have just opened her eyes sooner. But that's life, right? And sometimes we only learn by going through it ourselves. But at least I know she would have been proud of me right now. She would have been proud for how far I've come. Anyway, so the point is, you need to learn how to tolerate the discomfort of speaking up. Speak your truth early, while it's still soft. Before it has edges, before it turned into something rotten and ugly, that's when you speak your truth. And then pay attention to how that person responds to your honesty. Because the way someone handles your truth tells you everything you need to know about the emotional safety of that relationship. Okay, number 8, the last one, is making someone else responsible for your emotional regulation. Now, before we go any further, I want to be really clear here because people often get confused with this. Earlier, I said you should express your feelings. I've been saying that the whole time. You should say when something hurts you. You should speak your truth instead of swallowing it. And that still stands 100%. But here's the distinction, right? There's a difference between expressing a feeling and making someone responsible for managing it. So saying, when that happened, I felt hurt, is very different from saying, you made me feel this way, so now you need to fix it. The first is communication. The second is emotional outsourcing. So when you make someone else responsible for your emotional regulation, you turn them into the stabilizing device. You make them your mood manager, your nervous system babysitter. Now it's their job to text in the right tone and reply fast enough and anticipate all your triggers and reassure you constantly. And the moment they don't, you feel unsafe. That's not intimacy. That is dependency. Yes, relationships are relational. People impact one another, but no one else is responsible for your inner world except you. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They confuse being affected with being owed regulation. So now your anxiety becomes someone else's fault, and your insecurity becomes their responsibility. And slowly, the relationship starts orbiting around keeping you okay instead of two people choosing each other freely. And that's really dangerous. And that's not fair to the other person, and it becomes exhausting. So what do you do instead? Firstly, you need to sit with your feelings before assigning blame. So pause when you get activated and ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? What is this touching in me? Is this about the present moment? Or is it maybe about an old wound? And then, and this part matters, invite the support instead of demanding regulation right now. Say, I'm feeling anxious. Could you give me some reassurance right now? Or I'm feeling a bit triggered. Could we talk later when I'm more calm? That leaves room for the other person to make a choice. And choice is the difference between intimacy and obligation. Because yes, your feelings are real. They're valid, but they're still yours. And when both people take responsibility for their inner worlds, relationships stop feeling so heavy and they become lighter and more spacious and more honest, because love is two regulated adults meeting each other, not one person carrying the other person. There's the song, super niche song. I'm sure you've never heard of it before. It's called Nice to Each Other by Olivia Dean. I absolutely love it. While I was talking in this episode, I keep coming back to this song. Because on the surface, the message feels so simple. It's almost childlike. Oh, we could be nice to each other. But the more you think about it, the more you realize that that is all relationships really are or should be. Two people who want to be nice to each other. And now, what I'm about to say might sound controversial, but I don't think romantic relationships need to be hard work in the way that we've normalized. Will they be work? Yeah. Will they take effort sometimes? Yeah. But not constant emotional labor, not chaos, not pain that we disguise as passion. The hard work is not in the relationship. The hard work is before the relationship. The hard work is the thing you do on yourself. It's learning how to communicate, learning how to take responsibility, how to regulate yourself, how to hold your truth and make space for someone else's. And then when two people who have done that inner work come together, when you choose someone you respect, someone who knows themselves, someone who can meet you as an adult, that relationship won't feel like survival or like a constant battle. It will feel like support and growth, and it will feel like something that is making you better and not just something that is making you smaller. And obviously, yeah, relationship with parents and with family, that could definitely be harder because there's layers to that. It's history, you don't choose them. But guess what? And this is something that we know, but it's like we don't know it. You can choose your partner. You can choose them. And they will play a big part in your life. Your romantic partners is one of the biggest factors in your happiness, your mental health, your success, the way you see yourself. So use your free will. Be picky. Choose someone who has already done some of that inner work. Choose someone who wants to be kind, not just intense. Someone who can sit across from you, regulated, and be honest and open and receive your honesty and your openness. And yeah, of course, people are people, so have compassion. But having compassion doesn't mean lowering your standards to the floor. It means choosing people who are willing to meet you at your standards and grow from there. That to me is love. Two people choosing each other freely, and two people taking responsibility for themselves, and two people who want to be nice to each other. So that's everything for today. If this episode resonated with you, I would really love it if you left a rating or a review. Subscribe to the podcast. If you've been listening to this or watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That sounds so weird to say. And send it to somebody who might need to hear it. Start a conversation, send it to a partner, a friend, a parent, and let me know in the comments what you think. I would love to hear your opinion and what's something I maybe missed or something you agree with. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the work. The fact that you clicked on this episode shows that you want to take responsibility for yourself and show up as a better version of yourself in relationships. And I want to commend you for that. That's really cool. So until next Thursday, remember to get a little bit lost this week. That's where the magic finds you.